Welcome back, Tribe. It's your girl, Michelle Jones here with another episode of Tribe of Many Nations. We are, on day 14? Yes. Oh my gosh. How did we get 14 days in already? I don't know. Today we're going to be diving into the world of true crime yet again. I hope you guys are enjoying the kind of random breaks that we have between true crime and the paranormal and demonology. I hope you guys are enjoying the videos and learning some stuff, and if you have any information about any of these topics to share, please comment down below. If you are enjoying these videos, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and without further ado, let's get into this. In the small town of Eustis, Lake County, Florida, a double homicide was committed back in 1996 that would absolutely sweep the country into just a frenzy of fear and outrage for many reasons. So first, let's start out with the story itself. One late evening, a Jennifer Windorf, I hope I'm saying that name right, was sneaking back into her home. She had stayed out a little bit too late with friends and was kind of hoping to avoid the late night lectures that I'm sure most of us have received. She ended up passing what she thought was her father sleeping on the couch. She thought it was kind of odd, but she wanted to avoid the lecture, so she kind of crept by him quietly. That quiet was about to be broken by her own screams as she discovered the brutally beaten body of her mother in the kitchen. Now, Jennifer soon realized that her father had not been sleeping at all and was in fact dead as well. He had also been beaten to death with a crowbar, they would find out later. Jennifer frantically called the police, and she told them what had happened, and while she was waiting on them, she discovered that their family vehicle had been stolen from the garage, and her sister Heather, who was only 15 years old at the time, was missing. Now, even though Heather was only 15 years old, she had already had the strong misfortune of running into one Rod Ferrel. And I, again, might be butchering names. Rod was only 16 years old at the time he met Heather, but once they met, they became inseparable. I'm assuming they were like a boyfriend-girlfriend type of thing, but we'll get into that in just a second. So we do know that Rod himself grew up in a semi-dysfunctional home. We would learn that later on about him as the trial would progress. We also learned that through a strange twist of fate, he was introduced to vampirism by a local friend before he and his mother would make the move to Eustis in Lake County, Florida. Now, if you are not familiar with vampirism at all, it is the sometimes very serious belief that one has to survive off of blood, or if you're an energy vampire, maybe energy or sex or something like that. Now, this all started as a semi-innocent role-playing game, and Rod would soon discover that he was very good at recruiting people into his game. But what started out as this role-playing game quickly turned into a group-wide delusion, and it pretty much became a cult. They would call themselves a clan, I would assume, but to us, it would be a cult. Now, most of the teens that he would recruit into this vampire cult were also from troubled backgrounds. A lot of them were goth. A lot of them, didn't really fit in well with the rest of society, which, as we know, is part of why cults can become so alluring to some people. Now, when Rod's mother decided to move them to Eustis to live closer to her boyfriend at the time, Rod was probably very angry and hurt by his mother's decision to move because he had just started recruiting this big clan, this big group of people where he fit in, and he was like the leader, and he was kind of stepping into this really cocky role as the leader, and I'm sure it felt really bad to have that kind of stripped away from him. But he did stay in contact with some of those cult members, and I guess the one good thing for him with the move is that it brought him into contact with Heather. And like I said earlier, the two became inseparable. Now, of course, Heather Windorf was very young and impressionable at the time. We all are at that age. I don't even want to tell you what I was doing at 15 years old. But anyway, Heather and Rod met each other about 6 months prior to the actual murder of her parents. And during that time, the two would have this obsessive relationship with each other. And supposedly, Heather was actually inducted into Rod's cult. A few of his cult members came down, and supposedly, this is just hearsay that I read in an article, supposedly Rod and Heather actually exchanged blood. How exactly they did that, don't know, don't really want to know, but Heather was supposedly inducted into the cult that Rod ran. Now, Heather also made the extreme mistake of complaining to Rod about her home life. She would say that her home life was hell. She would say how much she hated her father, her parents, how much they kind of like were keeping her, I don't know, confined or something like that, which, hello, what teenager doesn't feel that way? Like, most teenagers have issues with authority, don't like their home life, don't like their parents during that time because they feel like they're an adult, which they are very much not. And I don't know, parents are just annoying at that time. However, Roderick took this to mean that Heather was in trouble and that she couldn't stay with her parents and that he had to save her from her parents or protect her from them. Like, when he started to explain his reasons behind killing her parents, he almost seemed like chivalrous about it, like it was his duty to kill them to protect her. And she went along with it, from what I can tell. So Rod Ferrel enlisted a couple of his cult members. They came down and with Heather broke into her home. And according to Roderick, he was originally going to let her mother live, but because she caused such a big scene, he did end up killing her as well. And basically all he did was beat them to death with a crowbar. I can't imagine, I mean, I can imagine worse ways to die, but at the same time, ow. Like, you know how long it takes to beat someone to death? And even then, sometimes it takes a really long time to actually die from it, even if you're unconscious. Now, Heather's mother's name had been Naomi or Ruth Windorf, and her father's name was Richard Windorf. I do want to take a moment to just say I send out, a lot of love and respect towards Jennifer and towards Heather. I mean, we don't really know if she really expected Rod to do what he did or not. I assume that she was part of the plan and that she didn't mind her parents being killed. But especially with Jennifer, I can't imagine how traumatic that was to come home and find your parents that way. No child should ever have to go through something like that. So let's just take a moment to kind of have a little bit of respect for the victims there, because that's just such unnecessary violence. Like, even if your home life is complete shit and you want to leave, nothing is worth taking a life, especially in such a brutal way. So after the murders were committed, the teens stole the car and literally drove across 4 states within like 4 days. So they were pretty much just driving the whole time. And that's when one of the cult members made a huge mistake, and they ran out of money, and she contacted her grandmother to try and have her wire them money or something like that. Well, the grandmother immediately notified the police. The police kind of set up a trap for them where they thought they were meeting the grandmother or something like that to get the money, and the police caught them. Now, Rod would immediately plead guilty to first-degree murder, but he would later on go on to claim that the other teens were innocent, that they had nothing to do with it. But come on now. You just watched somebody beat 2 people to death and you didn't do anything. You had something to do with it. Now, all of the teens did time except for Heather. She ironically walked away without serving any time, as far as I know. Now, I do want to take a quick moment to just kind of say that teenagers and young children do have flights of fancy. They like to read fantasy novels and watch things that have to do with fantasy, like Harry Potter and stuff like that. And I went through that phase, and let's be honest, a lot of adults stay in that phase because, fantasy is so much nicer than reality. However, if you do not stay grounded in reality, it is very easy to kind of turn this fantasy-like dream into a complete nightmare. And I think that's what kind of happens with some of these cults that are based off these like hardcore delusions. It's like they want to be in their fantasy world so badly that they try to make it happen through force. And that usually turns the whole thing into a nightmare because it just doesn't work that way. You have to stay grounded no matter what, especially with these role-playing games where people get like way into character and stay into character. You really have to be careful where your mental health is at when you're playing things like that, because it's so easy to get so wrapped up in the fantasy world that you create that you literally do have a break with reality and you don't remember yourself, and then stuff like this happens and it just all turns to shit. So that was pretty much it today, guys. Those murders were dubbed the Vampire Cult murders. I believe Ferrel was actually supposedly given the death sentence at one point, or maybe not. Maybe I'm confusing that. I've been researching so many true crime stories lately that they're all starting to blur together a little bit. But I want to say he was originally going to be put on death row, which was going to make him like the youngest kid on death row. But I believe that due to like the public outcry and stuff like that, they reduced it to, I want to say, life in prison without the possibility of parole, but who knows? They tend to be a little bit too lenient on kids sometimes. I feel like at the age of 16, if you're already committing a double homicide, I'm sorry, you got to go. But we're about to dive into another topic, which is very closely related to that, and we're about to get super, super scary when it comes to young children. I hope to see you guys tomorrow because it's not going to be an episode you're going to want to miss. Talk about freaky! So other than that, thank you all for tuning in. I hope you guys are enjoying the 31 days of Halloween. If you know anything else about this case, be sure to comment it down below so we all learn a little bit more. And yeah, love you all. See you tomorrow. Bye.